Hello everyone, I'm Sai Lakshmi from Analytics Plus and welcome to this webinar. In today's session, we'll discuss about how you can save big with advanced analytics for ServiceDesk Plus asset management. Before we begin, I want to inform you that if you have any questions during the course of this webinar, you can use the questions panel on the top left corner of your screen to type in your questions. I'll answer them shortly after the end of this session. You can also email your questions to the email address on your screen. To begin with, let's first understand why analytics for asset management is so important for organizations. Organizations spend a substantial portion of their IT budget on hardware and software assets. Let me give you some stats on this. Gartner studies show that enterprise IT spending across the globe is set to hit $3.8 trillion in 2019, and this number is only going to keep increasing by 3.2% every year. In addition to Gartner, there are a number of independent research firms that show that 89% of enterprises are looking to increase their IT budget this year to tackle security threats. Not to be left behind, 82% of government organizations across North America and Europe are expanding their IT budgets to incorporate newer technology to help them protect their infrastructure from cybersecurity attacks like WannaCry. As for small and medium businesses with an employee count of 500 to 1,000, the need to update outdated IT infrastructure is going to be the biggest driving force to increase their IT budgets. All these stats go on to prove that IT departments are set to witness a huge increase in budget. But is the entire IT budget used efficiently? Studies suggest that about 93% of organizations report spending money on shelfware. Enterprises are wasting as much as 25% of their software spent. About 74% of organizations are non-compliant with software licenses, with 44% of organizations paying $100,000 or more in true-up cost to their software vendors as a result of non-compliance. Now it's up to the IT department heads, or more specifically, asset managers, to ensure that the entirety of the IT budget is used in acquiring the most relevant and important hardware and software for the organization and utilizing them efficiently and to their fullest potential. This calls for a full-fledged IT analytics solution that can provide better insight into how the IT infrastructure works, how software and hardware assets are used, their average life cycle, etc. So you can get a complete picture of all your assets and help make strategic decisions supported by data necessary to keep your IT up and running. Furthermore, the need for IT analytics is fueled by four main factors. Heterogeneous asset estate. An organization's asset cannot always be categorized into a library easily. For example, an organization can have a number of assets such as desktop, laptops, and server, and you have to factor in the different vendors and the models that are in use. And mind you, this doesn't include the non-IT assets used by the organization. The next thing is that the data needed for analysis is often siloed in various applications or sometimes in various modules of the same application, making it difficult to perform cross-module analysis. And even if the data is available in one database for analysis, difficulty in creating reports forces asset managers to rely on database administrators to write SQL queries to create reports, a process that costs precious time and a lot of effort. And finally, the lack of real-time collaboration with team members on important findings makes it difficult to reach consensus. Decision makers are then forced to rely on sharing reports and dashboards via mail that take time and hinder contextual real-time collaboration. As a result, companies waste a significant portion of their IT budget due to lack of insight into IT expenditure, usage, and maintenance. A few examples of such wastage include purchase of new hardware and software assets when existing assets could be reused, paying for third-party support when vendor-assisted support might be sufficient, over-procuring and underutilization of assets, and using outdated technology or assets that should have been decommissioned long ago. However, with the aid of a robust analytics solution like ManageEngine Analytics Plus, organizations can maximize return on investment, cut down extra maintenance costs, use licenses optimally, reduce the number of unused assets and security risks, make effective purchasing decisions, formulate precise budgets, decrease the total cost of asset ownership, and reduce risk arising from asset failure or non-compliance. Do all of these sound too good to be true? In this webinar, I'm going to show you exactly how you can save big on asset management with analytics. More specifically, I'm going to show you how you can save in each stage of the asset lifecycle by eliminating wastage and ensuring proper utilization of existing assets. But before we move on, let me tell you a little bit about Analytics Plus, the application that I'm going to use for this session. Analytics Plus is a business intelligence and IT analytics solution from ManageEngine. Analytics Plus integrates with a range of help desk applications such as ManageEngine's ServiceDesk Plus, ServiceDesk Plus MSP, Support Center Plus, and a few other infrastructure monitoring and management applications such as Applications Manager, App Manager, and Desktop Central. You can also import data from a variety of cloud and local databases as well as files, feeds, and spreadsheets from your local environments such as desktops or laptops. You can also connect Analytics Plus to other applications via APIs. Setting up the integrations with ServiceDesk Plus is very simple and takes only a few minutes. If you're interested in setting up this integration, head over to your ServiceDesk Plus admin panel and look for the Advanced Analytics option and follow the on-screen instructions. Post integrations, you will see a set of reports and dashboards straight out of the box. Integration with other third-party help desks will involve a few additional steps. Moving on to the webinar, I'm going to show you the 5 different stages of asset management. In each stage, I'll be showing you 2 or 3 reports that will highlight where you currently stand as well as pinpoint the different ways that you can save in that stage. Let's get started. The first stage in asset management cycle is asset procurement. They say good planning is the halfway point to success. When you're talking about asset management, the very first thing that you ought to do is formulate a budget plan. A good place to start is by looking at the IT spending in the past. Here is the year-on-year comparison of the IT budget in the past 3 years. You can see that the IT spend in the last 2 years is particularly high. Given that hardware and software costs have also been increasing in the past few years, this report will help you present your point to the senior management when you pitch for the next year's IT budget. One thing you ought to keep in mind when looking at this report is that although it tells you how much of the budget you've spent, it doesn't tell you if all that spending is actually necessary or if all the assets purchased using that budget are being used efficiently. Now, this report shows you the spending by year. You can get a side-by-side comparison of the budget split into different quarters. Switch to the edit mode, and in your x-axis, which has acquisition date, switch to quarter. This will help you compare the quarterly split of the total IT spent. As per this report, my spending for quarter 1 and quarter 2 are higher than the other 2 quarters. Once you've looked at the overall budget for the year, the next report that you want to look into would be the IT budget spend chart that shows you how the budget is actually spent in acquiring new assets. Based on this report, the top 3 expenses for my organization are printers, workstations, and servers, followed by access point, while software, switches, and routers take about less than 5% of the total IT spent. This report can help me objectively evaluate if I'm spending on assets that are actually necessary, as well as ask myself this very important question. Do these assets require that much IT spending? Now, I seem to be spending a lot on printers, even more than workstations. This is a cause for concern and requires deeper analysis. The next report I have for you is the potential for savings. This is a very important report as it can tell you where you can save. As per my report, I have a few unused licenses for Kaspersky endpoint security and Microsoft Windows Server applications, worth about $2,500 and $2,000 respectively. Although these are minimal numbers from the organization's standpoint, cutting down on extra license purchases will help save my organization's IT budget on procuring other useful assets. Often, IT departments procure a large number of hardware and software assets in anticipation of a surge in headcount during peak season, expansion, new hires, and breakdown or malfunction of existing assets. It's always best to keep this number to the absolute minimum. Here's something that Walmart does. During their holiday season, that is in November and December, Walmart hires temporary employees to handle extra demand. This in turn causes a spike in gadget requirement, so the company keeps a buffer stock of gadgets to run its business without interruption. However, depending on the size of your business and your overall budget, you can either have buffer assets or choose to hire them on a need basis from your vendor. The next stage of asset management is asset deployment. This is the stage where all the assets are prepped before they are put to use. This includes asset inspection, asset installation, integration with other components, establishing operations or support processes, installing malware, and provisioning user access. However, this is also the stage where assets tend to be idle for too long. For example, new hires will require new equipments, software licenses, and other IT assets, or a changing trend in technology might call for a new hardware or software. Likewise, plans to expand headcount or open up a new branch requires additional IT assets. But what happens to those assets when these plans don't work out? They usually end up in the store. This reduces the available cash flow needed for purchasing other high priority assets and decreases the flexibility to react to market trends and threats. Not to mention the problem of assets becoming obsolete if they are left in the store for too long. A good way to find out if your organization is overpurchasing is to look into assets that have been in store for too long. Here's a report that can help. As per this report, I have 25 assets that have been in the store for 90 to 120 days and 35 assets that have been in store for 210 to 240 days. The next plan of action for me would be to mobilize these assets quickly. Depending on the nature, type, and requirement, I can either deploy them into use or return them back to the vendors. An important thing to note is that unutilized software assets tend to drain the IT budget quickly. You see, most software assets are purchased on yearly licenses, and if these assets are left in store for 200 days or more, that is, if they spend the first 7 months or more in store and then get deployed, it can cause a major strain on your IT budget because technically you would have spent those 7 months worth of license cost just to store them in your shelves. When you're looking at reports that show assets in store for too long, I'd recommend that you also look at a report like this one that lets you compare the number of days assets were in store with the number of days assets were in use, in repair, or disposed. This will give you an idea of how efficiently assets are being used. In my report, I can see that assets were in store for about 144 days and were in use for about 300 days. That means that these assets spend almost 1/3 of their life in storage. This shows that my asset administration and deployment system needs a serious rework, and that too immediately. Otherwise, I stand a chance to lose a major chunk of my IT budget due to assets remaining in store for too long. Moving on to the next stage of asset management, asset compliance. Even organizations that take meticulous care while purchasing assets might overlook opportunities to save on asset compliance by failing to ensure compliance with regulations, norms, and licenses. Now, this might not always be intentional. For example, a user that requires an Excel software might download a pirated copy of the internet without realizing the implications. Or a designer looking for a cloud design application might sign up for a free version online without checking with the IT team if it's acceptable to upload proprietary designs to the cloud. Called shadow IT, this is when any system in your organization runs on software that is either banned or discouraged by the organization's central IT department. These may include a wide range of applications such as file sharing applications, social media, other free collaborative tools or games that might introduce spyware, viruses, and other risks into your IT environment. Although your IT department is not directly responsible for managing and maintaining the infrastructure of these applications, your department is accountable for ensuring the security and compliance of data that your employees upload to the cloud. Failing to adhere to license regulations, compliance and security norms can cost the organization heavily in terms of levies, fines, and lawsuits. The first report on our list is prohibited software installations. With a report like this one that lists the number of prohibited software installations in use, you can easily alert the employees to remove prohibited software as quickly as possible. Completely eliminating prohibited software from your organization's IT umbrella can save you from having to face costly data breach and security issues which many organizations fall prey to. In my case, I have 4 instances of Vulkan runtime libraries installed. My next course of action would be to alert these users to remove the application from their devices. Moving on to our next report, we have unlicensed software installations. Now, as I mentioned before, this could be because of employees unintentionally installing a pirated or cracked software. Either my employees feel that they need additional software or they're testing out an external software that's not yet been approved by the central IT team. As per my report, I have quite a few employees who've installed Kaspersky Endpoint Security and one employee who has Microsoft Windows applications. My next step is to reach out to the owners of these devices and have them remove these applications. At a later stage, I can reach out to these employees and try to figure out why they needed an unlicensed software in the first place. This could help shed some light on end users' requirements and help me plan my next IT budget. The next stage of asset management is asset maintenance and support. On any given day, an organization has thousands of assets in play. New assets are constantly being added and old or redundant assets are getting replaced by state-of-the-art machines. However, one thing remains to be seen. Do these assets increase the workload of your existing technicians? Non-standard or poor quality assets or assets with outdated configuration requires a lot of maintenance and often fail, leading to intermittent crashes and downtime. As a result, these assets end up adding to the existing workload of your technicians, decreases their productivity, and makes it difficult for them to focus on high-priority service and incident tickets. For example, faulty RAMs are known to send desktops into a never-ending loop of restarts. The desktop would power up normally, and even before the operating system could fire up, the desktop will reload. An issue like this could instantly flood the inbox of your support technicians with requests ranging from my laptop has gone crazy to my desktop is possessed. This will end up sending your entire support team into overdrive fielding these requests. The best course of action here would be to identify assets with a long history of incidents. Here's a report that can help. Assets with a history of incidents. This report lists down assets with the most history of incidents. Based on this report, I can now dig deeper to find out whether these assets are failing due to environmental conditions, that is, a combination of other hardware and software installed in those assets, or if it's an architectural flaw that calls for completely eliminating those assets and replacing them with newer ones. Moving on to our next report, we have servers with less than 10% disk space. One of the most common complaints that help desks receive is related to the availability of disk space in servers. Usually, users run a few applications on the server and fail to remove or uninstall them once they are done. This takes up a server's available disk space to run important applications. As a result, monitoring applications that track the server send out alerts that are converted as incidents. This creates additional workload for technicians, pulling them away from resolving important help desk problems. These issues can be easily handled by sending out preemptive emails whenever disk space falls below predetermined levels. As per this report, one of my servers has less than 10% disk space. In fact, it's at about 0%. This calls for immediate action. Now we move on to the final phase of asset management, that is asset disposal and retirement. This is an important phase for asset managers because it is here that you can determine whether an asset that's currently in use is ready to be disposed and retired. It's a tough call because on one hand, you're under pressure from the management to get the maximum bang for your buck, which means you need to ensure you get the maximum use out of them. And on the other hand, you need to make sure that these assets don't get sent to the IT department for service and maintenance frequently, because that can seriously derail your support team's work schedule, lower their productivity, introduce unwanted priorities, increase downtime, and push back deadlines. The general trend in most large-scale enterprises is to use desktops and laptops for a period of about 3 to 4 years and servers for about 6 to 7 years. But deciding on when to pull the plug, so to speak, is a decision that's entirely up to the asset manager. Another reason why you need to pay attention to asset disposal and retirement is that the data from this stage can be used to determine your shopping list for the next year. It can also help you determine what are the assets that the organization needs to invest in and what are the assets that the organization can acquire from vendors. Again, this entirely depends on the equipment that is in question. For example, for a data center equipment, you would have to evaluate the performance, the power it consumes, and the average cost of support and maintenance. Whereas for devices like tablets and mobile phones that endure a lot of wear and tear, you just have to retire them without much thought. The important thing to keep in mind is to determine how long assets are in use before they can be replaced, so that we can decide on how we are going to replace them now that they are to be retired. One report you can look into is the average age of assets in use. Going by this report, the average age of workstation in my organization is about 24 months or 2 years. This is a pretty standard number as per industry norms. This report gives you the average lifespan of assets in use, so you can determine the expected lifespan of replacement assets and predict how long those assets can be expected to serve your organization. The last report I have for the day is the average depreciation percentage that tells you the average percentage of depreciation of the various product types. As per my report, routers, printers, access points, and workstations seem to have the highest depreciation percentages, while servers and switches seem to have 40 and 35% respectively. It's important to look at this report because it helps you identify assets that have the highest depreciation percentages. Sometimes, servers purchased from different vendors that have similar performance standards, usage, and life cycles can have different depreciation percentages. Likewise, mobiles and other handheld devices may differ in depreciation percentages based on brand and configuration. This information can come in handy for asset managers while planning their asset purchases. This brings us to the final leg of today's webinar. Let me quickly wrap things up with a summary. In this webinar, we discussed a few ways that can help you save big on your assets using advanced analytics. Here are the tips. Get a clear view of all your past IT spends and plan for future investments. Align IT needs with business goals to make important purchase decisions such as procurement and renewals. Control IT costs through planned asset purchase. Determine if past IT spends are utilized properly and make sure to reduce unnecessary IT expenditure by knowing exactly what is needed for your organization. Minimize idle time of assets. Although idle time cannot be eliminated entirely, ensure that IT assets are administered immediately. Remember, expensive assets sitting in your storage room is only going to drain your IT budget while adding no value to your organization. Minimize risks due to license non-compliance by better tracking workstations that are using unlicensed or prohibited software. This can protect you from levies and fines. Cut down the additional workload for your technicians by investing only in assets that deliver better results and offer longer asset life. And finally, take into account the complete life cycle of assets, including average days in use, percentage of depreciation, etc., while formulating your asset plan for the next year. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed this session. Most of the reports that I showed you during the session are offered out of the box for Analytics Plus integrations with ServiceDesk Plus. If you're already using Analytics Plus, please upgrade to the latest version of ServiceDesk Plus and Analytics Plus. If you're new to Analytics Plus, please scan the QR code flashing on your screen to download a free 30-day trial of Analytics Plus. Well, that's all from me for now. If you have any questions, please drop an email to sailakshmi.b@zohocorp.com. Thank you and have a great day.